So, you're rolling up to a stoplight and you are smelling a ton of burning oil from your Mercedes M272 or M273 engine. My name is Danny Kruger with FCP Euro, and today we're going to be identifying all of the oil leaks that you need to be looking out for, as well as the stinkier ones that you're going to want to fix in order to get rid of that odor. So when Mercedes moved from the M112 V6 and the M113 V8 of last generation over to the M272 and M273, like the one behind me and that we're talking about today, they improved on a lot of the leaky rubber gaskets that would generally cause oil leaks on those older engines. They switched from the rubber gaskets over to a liquid sealant. What that means for us is oil leaks are a lot less common, which also means when you're finding a leak in the driveway or you're smelling something at a stoplight, it's generally a lot easier to locate and identify. So we have some of the common causes of the oil odors and leaks that you'll find on these engines right in front of me here, from cam plugs to the PCV drip tray, over to the oil cooler and its gaskets. We're going to pop the hood here behind you and actually show you what that looks like on the car. And of course, we have some kits on our site that are going to resolve for these and kind of get rid of them immediately. So without further ado, we're going to pop the hood and lock in on some of those leaky, nasty areas of this M272 behind me. So first, we're going to start off with the oil leaks that you're probably smelling. So this will generally be after you've got the vehicle up to temperature. So you're on your commute, you've driven on the highway, you get off, you pull up to a stoplight or a stop sign, and then you start kind of smelling burning oil in the cabin. First one I'm going to recommend you check is going to be at the very rear of the engine. We'll insert some B-roll shots here. These are going to be your cam plugs at the rear of the engine, as well as the oil drip tray. So the drip tray is part of the oil centrifuge system for crankcase ventilation. The plugs are simply just plugs on the back of the engine. They're big plastic circles. They're very easy to locate. All of these are relatively easy to replace, and what happens is they all have their own O-rings and seals. As they age over time and things shrink and age and crack, you'll start to get oil originally just kind of as a vapor on the back of the cylinder head, and then from there it'll start to leak a lot heavier to the point of liquid oil running down the back of the engine. The reason you're going to smell this is both of the catalytic converters run directly underneath these, and as the oil drips down onto the hot catalytic converters, it's going to burn, evaporate, and you're going to get that odor wafting into the cabin as you sit there idle. So right down over here, we have the largest cam plug on our M272 here, and you can kind of see oil caked all around it. This is an example of one that's leaking very heavily. Here is an example of one of the replacements. It's just a simple plastic disc. It's got an O-ring to seal. You can do this repair in a couple of minutes with just a flathead screwdriver. You're just going to pop it out. We'll actually have a video linked in the description below of exactly how you would go about replacing your cam plugs. But on this M272, because there is no vacuum pump, it's going to be one large one and then two little ones, and that's it. That's all that's involved in the cam plug replacement. All right, another common oil leak that'll cause that kind of oily odor in the cabin that you'll want to look for on the back of the engine is going to be the oil drip tray. This is also known as the centrifuge cover. We have one right here, and of course there's the one on the back of the vehicle over there. This one in particular is actually hemorrhaging oil down the back of the engine. So just like those cam plugs, we actually see a rubber seal that lines the inside and affixes to the back of the cylinder head. As this is going to wear and shrink over time, just like the cam plugs, you're going to get kind of originally just a little bit of an oily vapor coming out and then eventually liquid oil. An easy way to check on these as well as the cam plugs, super simple. Ideally wait for the engine to cool down so you don't hurt yourself. Take a finger, just run it right underneath the cam plug on the back of the cylinder head. If it comes away with gunky residue or any liquid oil, it's a good sign that these are probably leaking and you'll probably want to replace them. This one is a slightly more involved DIY than those cam plugs. We'll have one coming for you very soon, of course, because it does have the E-Torx bolts rather than just popping off with a screwdriver like the cam plugs. Also, while you're in there and when you do get it off, you'll want to check this nylon seal. These can erode over time on the other part of the centrifuge system, and if you see that this seal has worn, you're going to want to replace the oil drip pan, which is located on the back of the camshaft. So that will cover the common causes of oil odors at the rear of the engine. Now we're going to move a bit further forward. So moving a little bit further forward as to causes of why you're smelling oil, going to be around the oil fill cap actually. So as a general rule of thumb, if you're smelling oil or burning oil when the car is warm, that's generally going to mean what's happening is oil is dripping onto some part of the exhaust or the exhaust manifold, the catalysts, and then when it hits those hot surfaces, that's when it's going to evaporate and you're going to get the odor. So we've already talked about our cats at the rear of the engine. Now we're going to move forward to the area around the exhaust manifold with this oil fill cap. So bring you on in close over here, and you'll actually see this car is definitely a good example of this happening, where you can see the oil kind of running down the valve cover here and towards the exhaust manifold. So the M272 and the M273, as we mentioned a little bit earlier on, the valve covers are not actually using a rubber seal. It's a liquid sealant that holds them on. As a result of that, you're very rarely going to get something like a valve cover gasket leak. It can happen. It's very atypical for these engines. So while you generally would see oil on the top of the valve cover like this and think with something like an M112 or an M113 engine or even a BMW, hey, my rubber valve cover gasket has gone bad and that's what's causing all of this oil on top of the cylinder head. Because of the fact that Mercedes has updated this, we would actually generally look to other areas like this oil fill cap because of the fact that these engines are usually a lot less leak prone in those areas. So on the fill cap itself, there's a rubber seal, and these can definitely go bad over time, which will cause a little bit of oil dripping down the fill neck here. Additionally, it's not atypical that when you're changing your oil, you get a little bit of spillage or even a lot of spillage trying to fill the car up, and that'll lead to that oil running down the top of the valve cover. In any of these instances, as the oil is running and airflow is coming through the front of the engine, it's going to kind of run the oil down towards the back, which is, you can actually see the avenue that the oil has traveled on top of this valve cover here flowing backwards. And then when it hits that exhaust manifold, we're of course going to get the oil odor. So if you're seeing a pattern similar to this running on the top of the valve cover, you may think it is your valve cover. However, because of that liquid sealant, it's a lot less likely to be that and a lot more likely to be something like this oil fill cap. Moving even a bit further forward than the oil fill cap, we have the camshaft position sensors, or the cam magnets, located at the front of the engine. Now these are a little bit less likely to actually give you that odor. It is still possible though if they're leaking badly enough. So these are going to be located on both cylinder banks. For the sake of showing you, we're actually going to show it on the passenger side just because they're a little bit easier to see. But these are located right on the front of our timing cover. One's here and one is here. So you can see these ones are caked pretty heavily in oil. And what happens is, again, these have an O-ring that seals to the front of the cylinder head. That O-ring, again, shrinks, just like we were talking about at the rear of the engine, shrinks, cracks as it ages, and then you're going to start getting oil kind of running down the front of the cylinder head. It's going to be the same type of deal where at first it'll be a vapor that'll kind of accumulate grit, and then it can, in severe cases, become liquid oil dripping down. This is a lot less likely to kind of flow around the cylinder head and hit the exhaust manifold, but in more extreme cases, it can. The easiest way to generally bounce between something like the oil fill cap leaking and also these cam magnets is actually going to be to clean up the mess. So when you see oil in that area, you don't know which is causing which, rather than throw parts at the solution waiting for the smell to go away or something like that, we generally recommend that you come in with something like brake clean or some other solvent, clean off the surfaces, get everything prepped and shiny again so that you can come back into the engine bay in a couple of weeks and a couple hundred miles of drive time and see if you can now isolate where that oil leak is coming from. So something like these cam magnets on the front of the engine, it may look like they're leaking when in reality, maybe someone just missed a little bit when they were filling up the car with oil, causing oil to cascade down the front and accumulate around these cam magnets. These do need to be replaced because of those seals going bad. So it's very possible that it is leaking. However, if we don't have to replace them and we just need a fill cap, that obviously makes our life a lot easier. So go at it smart rather than overworking yourself. So of course, we do have the cam magnets on the opposite cylinder head as well. And these also can leak, of course. They're a little bit trickier to get to, but you can kind of get two birds with one stone if you're trying to seal up your oil leaks with these, because in order to get to these guys and to properly get them removed to replace them, you're generally going to remove your power steering reservoir, which is right down over here, and also you're going to want to remove your oil cooler, which is right here. So the oil cooler itself is also a very common cause for an oil leak on the M272 and the M273. That can present itself in a couple of different ways. As we can see on this one, there's actually a lot of oily residue just right around the seal. I have a clean and brand new one right over here, just so I can kind of show you the way that this mounts. So this actually seals directly to the oil filter housing. There's a seal that goes on the inside. We have some over here. This is all part of the kit that we sell. But as that seal ages over time, it can present as an oil leak just like this, or what you may actually end up seeing is signs of oil contamination in your coolant. A lot of the time on the M272 and 273, this is an area you'd want to look at before something like a head gasket where you would on another car, because of the fact that when these seals start aging and kind of warping and getting a little iffy, it'll cause the oil and the coolant to mix a bit. So these ones you can kind of knock out all in one go because of the fact that you're going to want to take off the oil cooler when you do these cam magnets. You just get a full comprehensive kit, reseal everything as you take it off and put it back on, and you're going to take care of 2 more common oil leaks and remedy the whole issue on this side of the cylinder head. So now we're underneath the car, and this is going to be less to actually point out causes of leaks because we've kind of identified most of those from up top. But we can find some good indicators as to where these may be coming from, as well as identify the result of some of these heavier leaks and isolate them to where the odors are coming from. So starting at the front over here, a really good way to know if you have an issue with the oil cooler seal or the oil filter housing gasket is to look in the area on this M272 or even your M273 in the area of the AC compressor. So if you look right up underneath here, I got my flashlight, you can see there's a ton of oil accumulation all over the bottom of this AC compressor. Now, the oil filter housing and the cooler sit directly atop of this. It's a very good indicator when you're seeing this much oil that one of those seals is failing or has already failed, and that's causing the oil to kind of cascade down the front of the engine. You can also kind of come in at a different angle in front of the front cross member here and see if you can see oil running down the back. In our instance, if you look up there, it's kind of a tight fit, but you can actually see liquid oil dripping off the bottom between where the oil cooler sits and where the oil filter housing is. For me, that's going to tell me that all this oil running down the front of the motor is a lot more likely to be the oil cooler seal than it is the oil filter housing seal. Fortunately for us, that's actually an easier replacement, and we can knock out the cam magnets while we're there, but that's definitely a bigger leak that you'd want to take care of sooner rather than later. You're losing a lot of oil in that instance. All right, and then also at the rear of the engine, if you've kind of looked around and isolated, maybe my cam magnets or my oil drip tray are leaking. I can't really tell if that's the odor that I'm smelling. If you can get underneath the car and actually look around the catalysts here and here, that's another really easy way to identify if that is the smell that you're getting. So if you look at ours here, you can also look at the back of the cylinder head if you can get a good angle and see if oil is dripping down. If you can't get in there, you can just take a look at these cats, and I mean, you can actually see old patterns of oil kind of dripping down and burning as they hit this by these black lines and pooling. So that's a really good indicator that the oil is running down the back of the cylinder head, meaning our cam plugs and our drip tray, same thing over here, are leaking down the back of the engine. Also, if you look at the heat shields around the catalyst and you see oil on there, obviously these are surfaces that should never have oil on them to begin with, so that's going to indicate an oil leak at the rear of the engine. So that is going to include pretty much all of the external oil leaks that are going to be giving you odors or leaking down the front or the back of your M272 or M273 engine. If you're concerned about PCV and centrifuge issues, which are going to cause the leakage into the engine, we'll have some videos coming for you later on this very vehicle right here. But in the meantime, if you're looking forward to those, or if you enjoyed this video as you're tracking down some leaks on your engine, feel free to like, subscribe, comment below, tell us what you're working on, and you can look forward to a lot more M272 and M273 diagnostic coming your way very soon.